And Dr. Madada, thanks so much for taking the time to join us this afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to start with potential treatments because we had this issue, or this warning, I should say, from the FDA today against the use of malaria drugs in COVID-19 patients. And it's interesting because we've had President Trump in the past touting hydroxychloroquine just in terms of how it could potentially treat or help, manage some of the symptoms when it comes to coronavirus. What do we know about the FDA's warning? And then also, what do you think, or when we have the president touting unproven treatments, what kind of public health risk do you think this creates?
Well, I think first starting off, we always have to follow medical professionals and the advice of medical doctors when it comes to any type of medical issues, right? So this outbreak is an infectious disease outbreak. And when we look at the treatments that are currently available, first, there is no treatment proven for coronavirus disease. There's a number of different medications and therapeutics going through clinical trials all around the world. Nothing has proven to be kind of the silver bullet right now. So we need to make sure that we're going through the proper channels and actually evaluating these drugs for safety, efficacy, and obviously making sure that they work. And so that is a long process. And so providing any of this preliminary information, everyone should always take it with a grain of salt. As you're seeing some of these pharmaceutical medications, showing that they are being, they're in clinical trials. Some of them obviously are, the cohort is much smaller than we would want it to be. But I think the bottom line is whether it's hydroxychloroquine or any other type of medication that's still being evaluated, we need to make sure that we're going through the proper process and then making sure we're following medical advice. So regardless of what politicians may say, doesn't matter what their status is, we need to make sure that we are following the advice of medical professionals because these are individuals' lives on the line. We want to make sure that the public messaging is accurate and correct. And you're seeing a lot today. Some of the trending taglines is don't take disinfectants and ingesting, disinfectants and the like. And so it's unfortunate that we have to battle this misinformation in the middle of a pandemic, and that we have to focus on the misinformation that is being spewed out by higher levels when we really need to focus on how we can improve the response and protect as many lives as possible.
Yeah, speaking of improving the response and the response to the virus so far, an outbreak like this, being prepared is so important. And as a senior director for the Special Pathogens Program in New York City, it was your job really to prepare the city for an outbreak like this. How did you prepare the city for an outbreak, for the outbreak that we're seeing now? And do you think enough was done not only in New York City, but really on a national scale to try and contain this virus?
So just to clarify, and there's been a lot of confusion, I don't oversee the preparedness for the entire New York City. I work for a healthcare system. And so there's hospitals and post-acutes and outpatient clinics. So my role and responsibility is confined to our healthcare system. And so when we try to maintain preparedness for these types of events, we build a foundation based on basic infection control, right? So whether you're responding to measles, COVID-19, or Ebola, you have a basic foundation in place. And so we try to augment that basic foundation, and then we modify it depending on the disease that we're facing. So for Zika, the primary target population was, those that were pregnant. And so we had a robust response there. For measles is something that we just came across not too long ago. We had a very large epidemic here in New York City. We were able to focus on various points of entry, looking at the measles response, ED, and the like. And then here with COVID-19, it's an all hands on deck approach. And so we had a basic foundation, and we were able to augment that basic foundation. Everybody has a plan in place for pandemics and epidemics. Plans are useless, right? Because they sit on a shelf and they collect dust. It's the planning that goes along every single phase of it when we're responding to these types of epidemics or pandemics. And so we have a robust system in place. We have an ICS structure. We bring all the appropriate people to the table, and we're able to make decisions based on what's coming out. And it's very important to also note that as things continue to change. When I say things, data continues to change. because we're learning more every single day. We need to make changes to our decisions based on that data that's coming out. So what we knew yesterday may have very well changed today, and we need to make our decisions based on best available information, based on peer-reviewed information, based on public health guidance. And that's exactly what we've been doing in terms of not only maintaining our state of readiness, but being able to respond to the outbreak, as it continues to unfold.
Dr. Madad, do you think outbreaks like this, are they almost inevitable from your point of view?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you look at in the past 400 years, there's been over 30 pandemics, influenza pandemics. In the past century, we've had three, major pandemics, if you will. So we know these are events that are inevitable. They are going to continue to happen because we live in a world where we have all the ingredients for pandemics, for infectious disease outbreaks. We can name a number of factors, right? So climate change is one, human behavior is another. We're constantly, as humans, expanding our ecological footprint. All of these have major consequences when it comes to infectious diseases. And then at the same time, in order to prepare for these types of events, knowing they're going to happen, we need to make sure that we have the infrastructure and system in place and the surveillance in place. And that's where we're lacking across the world, is we don't invest enough in preparedness. And so when these events happen, we, for some reason, are caught off guard and then have to have a disease-specific response when we're not really addressing the underlying failures in our processes to begin with. So there's still a lot of work to be done. We're facing a pandemic. We're responding to the pandemic, but we need to also make sure that we have and we learn from this experience, and that we are able to apply for the future epidemics and pandemics that will inevitably occur around the world.
Dr. Madad, I was reading an op-ed that you wrote in the Washington Post back in December, and you were talking about this need for funding. And in that, you were warning lawmakers that the funding needed to prepare hospitals for infectious disease outbreaks would expire in May. And this, of course, was right before we heard Wuhan reported the first cases. They didn't know it was necessarily coronavirus, but the first pneumonia-like cases to the WHO. How do you think funding, or lack of funding, I should say, how big of an issue has this been, and what policies do you think need to be changed in order to better address this?
Well, the approach right now that we've had on a national scale has always been inject money for a disease-specific cost, and then once that disease is done, or once that epidemic is over with, you take that money away, and there's no sustainment. That's been a very unfortunate cyclical cycle that we've had here in the nation. And case in point, when it comes to Ebola, right? So in Ebola in 2014, Congress appropriated millions of dollars to develop a healthcare system and a public health system that can rapidly respond to Ebola and other special pathogens. That was 5 years of funding. It's up on the chopping block this year, and right now it has not been the renewal of funding has not happened, with the exception of 5 regional centers. We are in the United States, we have over 6,000 hospitals. Every one of these hospitals needs to be prepared for these types of events. It's an all hands on deck approach. And so similarly for Zika and other types of events, we've had funding, but then it dissipated after a certain period of time. And so we need to continue the sustainment of these types of funding streams, and to make sure we have a good preparedness cycle for everything under the sun, whether it's, again, an emerging or re-emerging infectious disease, or the disease X that we may be facing. And so that's one of the big policy changes that I really hope that happens at the national scale, is that we change our method of this, injecting money when it's needed and then taking it away. The other thing in terms of, preparing and maintaining this state of readiness is that we need to make sure that this expertise that we've developed over the years, these centers for excellence that we've had, the resources that we've put in, whether it's equipment and supplies, we continue to maintain it, right? And that requires a lot more manpower and a lot more resources, but we really need to look into making sure that all of this is sustained in the long term.
Dr. Madad, there was a report today, I think Reuters had it, global leaders in partnership with the World Health Organization launching an initiative, and they're doing this to accelerate their work on drugs, tests, and vaccines for COVID-19. The U.S. is not involved in this. What do you think the impact, or what's the potential impact this could have on the U.S.'s efforts to fight the virus really on a national scale?
It's extremely unfortunate, and what we know is we're all in this together. I'm sure this is something that everyone constantly hears all the time, but it is very much true, especially in a pandemic, because we want to make sure that all of us are collaborating and transparent. And U.S. really needs to be at the forefront of this. We are an extremely resource-rich country, and it's shameful, really, that we've been taking a back seat when it comes to this particular response. We have not had the response that we were hopeful for, and we need to make sure that we continue to partner with these international organizations and countries around the world to make sure that we're able to come together and provide our scientific expertise in this. And we here in the United States, we have a lot of really great public health officials, scientific bodies. We have a lot of knowledge, and we really want to make sure that we're leveraging this through this international partnership. So it's unfortunate that that has happened, and I'm hopeful that that decision actually changes.
Dr. Saira Madad, you're extremely busy right now, so thanks so much for taking the time to join us this afternoon. We wish you all the best.
Thank you for having me.
Hey investors, Zach Guzman here. Are you interested in learning more about the markets and getting the latest financial news? Well, then click right here to subscribe to our Yahoo Finance YouTube channel. Get the latest up-to-the-minute market analysis, big interviews in the world of finance, and information on how to manage your money every day wherever you are.